Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Invisible King. Russell Merrick surveyed the gleaming 50-story corporate headquarters of Apex Innovations from his modest office on the 23rd floor. To the world, he was just another mid-level operations manager, competent but unremarkable. Few suspected that the entire building, along with the multi-billion-dollar empire it represented, belonged to him. Rain pelted against the windows as Russell checked his watch. It was his 15th wedding anniversary, but instead of anticipation, he felt only the cold certainty of betrayal. For 6 months, he had known about his wife Adrienne's affair with Barry Donovan, the man everyone believed was Apex's visionary founder and CEO. Russell's phone vibrated with a text from Felix, his oldest friend and the only person who knew his secret. They're at the Westlake Hotel again. Room 714. Are you sure about this? It's time, Russell texted back. He still remembered the day he'd met Adrienne Cooper 16 years ago. She was vibrant and ambitious, working as a marketing associate while pursuing her MBA. Russell had already amassed considerable wealth through a series of brilliant investment moves, but craved anonymity. When they married, he maintained his deliberately modest lifestyle, telling her he wanted to succeed on merit rather than inherited wealth, a half-truth that concealed his growing business empire. 10 years ago, when Russell quietly acquired the struggling tech company that would become Apex Innovations, he needed a frontman, someone with charisma and presence who could be the public face while he worked behind the scenes. Barry Donovan, with his perfect smile and polished Harvard MBA, fit the bill. Russell installed him as the apparent CEO, while secretly controlling every significant decision through encoded directives and shell companies. The arrangement worked perfectly for years. Russell maintained his anonymity while building Apex into a juggernaut. Only Felix and a handful of private attorneys knew the truth. Even the board of directors believed Barry was the visionary behind the company's meteoric rise. Russell opened his desk drawer and removed the small recording device. The conversation it contained would ensure that today's confrontation went exactly as planned. As he drove home in his 6-year-old sedan, Russell reflected on how his children had grown increasingly distant. Zachary, now 17, and Penny, 15, had once adored their father. But adolescence, combined with Adrienne's subtle undermining, had changed that. They saw their father as a disappointment, a middle manager drone while their friends' parents were executives, doctors, and entrepreneurs. Last Thanksgiving, he'd overheard Zachary telling a cousin, "Dad's just not ambitious. Mom says he could have been Barry's boss by now if he had any drive." Russell's unassuming home in a pleasant but unremarkable suburb revealed nothing of his true worth. He pulled into the driveway, noting Adrienne's luxury SUV, a gift from Barry for her work as Apex's new marketing director, a position she'd secured 6 months after beginning their affair. Inside, Russell found Adrienne in the kitchen, her designer outfit and perfect makeup incongruous with their modest surroundings. The table was set for 2, with expensive champagne chilling in an ice bucket. "You're home early," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "It's our anniversary," Russell replied, setting his briefcase on the counter. "I thought we could spend the evening together." "About that," Adrienne began, her tone businesslike. "We need to talk." "Yes," Russell agreed. "We certainly do." Chapter 2. The Puppet Master. The following morning, Barry Donovan strode through Apex's gleaming lobby, nodding at the security guards who scrambled to greet him. At 45, Barry cultivated the image of a self-made titan, bespoke suits, carefully maintained physique, and the confident demeanor of someone born to command. Few suspected that his real talent was taking credit for other people's ideas. In the executive elevator, Barry checked his reflection in the polished brass panels and straightened his Italian silk tie. Today was the culmination of months of planning. With Russell finally out of the picture, he could consolidate his position and eliminate any possibility of the truth coming to light. His phone chimed with a text from Adrienne. "It's done. Filing the papers today." Barry smiled. Everything was falling into place. He had first noticed Adrienne at the company Christmas party 2 years ago. Smart, beautiful, and clearly dissatisfied with her husband's lack of ambition, she represented everything he wanted in a partner, the perfect corporate wife to enhance his carefully constructed image. Their affair had begun shortly after he'd promoted her to the marketing team. Seducing her had been surprisingly easy. She was hungry for the lifestyle Russell couldn't provide, and Barry offered glimpses of luxury that made her existing life seem shabby by comparison. "Your husband's a good man," he had told her during a late-night strategy session that had nothing to do with marketing, but he lacks vision. "Some men are content to remain in the background. You deserve more." What Barry didn't know was that Russell had built the surveillance system that monitored every corner of Apex headquarters. He didn't know that Russell had watched their first kiss in the executive boardroom, or that he had recordings of every meeting where Barry had claimed Russell's ideas as his own. As Barry entered his expansive corner office, his assistant Olivia looked up nervously. "Mr. Donovan, there's someone waiting for you. He says it's urgent." Barry frowned. "I don't have any appointments this morning. He says he represents Chimera Holdings. He wouldn't give his name, just said it concerns the ownership structure of Apex." Barry's blood ran cold. Chimera Holdings was the shadowy investment firm that owned controlling interest in Apex, an entity he dealt with only through encrypted communications and anonymous attorneys. "Send him in," Barry said, forcing confidence into his voice. The man who entered was in his 60s, silver-haired, and immaculately dressed. "Mr. Donovan, I'm Howard Lloyd, legal counsel for Chimera Holdings. There's been a significant development regarding the company's ownership structure." "What development?" Barry asked, his mouth suddenly dry. "The majority shareholder has decided to take a more active role in operations, effective immediately." "That's impossible," Barry said. "Our agreement has been terminated," Lloyd interrupted, sliding a document across the desk. "You'll find everything in order. A press release will go out at noon." As Barry scanned the document, his hands began to shake. "This can't be legal. Who is this person?" Lloyd smiled thinly. "I believe you know him as Russell Merrick." Across town, Russell sat in his attorney's office, watching the color drain from Adrienne's face as she reviewed the prenuptial agreement she had signed 16 years ago. "This can't be right," she whispered. "Russell is just a manager. How could he possibly?" "Mr. Merrick is the majority owner of Apex Innovations," the attorney explained calmly. "His net worth is approximately $2.3 billion. However, as the agreement clearly states, in the event of infidelity, you are entitled only to the assets explicitly listed in your name, which amount to your personal bank account and vehicle." Russell watched his wife's world collapse in real time. The careful masks they had both worn for years were finally slipping away. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Why pretend to be something you're not?" "I could ask you the same question," Russell replied. "I valued privacy and freedom over recognition." "What was your excuse for the past 8 months with Barry?" Adrienne's phone began to ring. Barry's name flashed on the screen. "You might want to answer that," Russell suggested. "I think he's just received some interesting news." Chapter 3: The Anniversary Ambush. Russell arrived home that evening to find Adrienne waiting, her eyes puffy from crying, but her posture rigid with determination. On the dining table lay a stack of papers, divorce filings. "Happy anniversary, loser," she spat, slamming her hand on the documents. "The kids and I are moving in with my lover, your boss. You're fired, homeless, and broke." Russell noticed Zachary and Penny standing in the hallway, suitcases at their feet, expressions of contempt mirroring their mother's. So they had chosen sides without hearing his side. He calmly removed his jacket and sat down at the table. "Is that what Barry told you to say?" Adrienne's triumphant expression faltered slightly. "He called you into his office this morning and fired you. Don't pretend it didn't happen." Russell smiled. "Funny, I haven't been to the office today. I've been with my attorneys." "Liar. Barry told me everything. He's finally done carrying you at the company." "I just smiled," Russell said softly. "Funny, your lover just got a call from the real owner of the company. Check your phone, darling." As if on cue, Adrienne's phone chimed with a news alert. She glanced down, and her eyes widened in horror. "No, he said you were nothing." "Impossible," she whispered. Russell turned the laptop on the table toward his family. On the screen was the Apex Innovations website, now displaying a press release. Apex Innovations founder Russell Merrick steps into CEO role. But then it happened. Russell continued, clicking to reveal another page. A gallery of photos showing Barry and Adrienne together in hotel rooms, restaurants, and even the Apex boardroom, dates and timestamps clearly visible. "Dad, what is this?" Zachary asked, moving closer to the screen. "The truth," Russell replied. Your mother and Barry have been having an affair for 8 months. During that time, they've been planning to divorce me, take everything I've built, and cut me out of your lives. That's not, Adrian began. Russell cut her off by pressing play on an audio recording. Barry's voice filled the room. Once Russell's out of the picture, we'll have everything. The house, the kids, and I'll make sure he never works in this industry again. He's a nobody, Adrian. He doesn't matter. Penny's face crumpled. Mom, is this true? Adrian stood frozen, her carefully constructed narrative disintegrating around her. There's more, Russell said, his voice cold as he addressed his children. Everything you thought you knew about our life was a choice I made. I'm not just another employee at Apex. I founded the company. I own it. Barry was just a figurehead I installed. That's impossible, Zachary scoffed, though uncertainty had crept into his expression. Russell pulled up banking records and legal documents on the screen. I built Apex from nothing 10 years ago. Everything Barry claimed to have accomplished was my work. I stayed in the background because I valued privacy over recognition. He turned to Adrian. I knew about your affair from the first day. I've watched you both planning to destroy me, all while living off my success. Why didn't you say anything? Adrian whispered. I wanted to see how far you would go, Russell replied. And now I know. He stood and addressed his children directly. You have a choice to make. You can go with your mother and Barry, though I should mention that as of this morning, Barry no longer works at Apex, and the penthouse apartment he promised you belongs to the company. Or you can stay here, in the home that I own outright, and we can begin to rebuild some trust. Zachary and Penny exchanged glances, their adolescent certainty shattered by the revelations. Russell's phone rang. He answered, listening briefly before saying, Send them up. Who was that? Adrian demanded. Security, Russell replied. They're escorting Barry from the building. Apparently, he's not taking his termination well. He turned to his children. You should know that whatever you decide today will be permanent. I don't give second chances. The doorbell rang, and the true power dynamics of their family, hidden for so long beneath layers of deception, were finally, irreversibly exposed. Chapter 4. The First Domino. 3 days after the anniversary confrontation, Russell stood before the assembled employees of Apex Innovations, the sleek auditorium silent as he took the podium. Gone was the unassuming middle manager. In his place stood a commanding presence in a perfectly tailored suit, his eyes sharp and assessing. For 10 years, I've watched you all from the shadows, he began. Today, that changes. I'm Russell Merrick, the founder and true architect of everything Apex has become. A murmur swept through the audience. In the front row, Olivia, Barry's former assistant, looked shell-shocked. Beside her sat Teresa Malone, head of legal, who had suspected the truth for years but kept her theories to herself. You've been told that Barry Donovan was the visionary behind our success. That was a fiction I created for strategic purposes. As of today, I'm assuming direct control of all operations. Russell outlined his vision for the company's future with such clarity and insight that even the skeptics in the room began to nod. It became obvious to everyone that whoever Russell Merrick truly was, he understood Apex on a fundamental level that Barry never had. After the meeting, Russell called Teresa into his new office, Barry's former domain now stripped of its ostentatious decorations. You weren't surprised by the announcement, he observed. Teresa smiled thinly. Let's just say the legal documentation never quite matched Barry's version of events. I kept my suspicions to myself. Which is why you're still here, Russell replied. I need people who can see through facades and keep counsel. I'm restructuring the executive team, and I want you as chief legal officer. What about Adrian? Teresa asked carefully. My wife no longer works for Apex, Russell said, his tone making it clear the subject was closed. However, I believe she's planning to contest our prenuptial agreement. I'd appreciate your insights on that matter. At home, Russell found the house eerily quiet. Zachary and Penny had chosen to stay with their mother temporarily until things settled down. They had moved into a hotel suite, not the luxury penthouse Barry had promised, but an expensive stopgap while Adrian strategized her next move. Felix arrived that evening with Chinese takeout and bourbon. So the kids went with her, he said, pouring 2 glasses. Russell nodded, his expression unreadable. They'll discover the truth about their mother soon enough. And then what? You'll welcome them back with open arms. No, Russell said quietly. The moment they chose to leave with her, Knowing what she'd done, they made their decision. Family isn't just about blood, Felix. It's about loyalty. Felix studied his oldest friend. This isn't just about Adrian and Barry anymore, is it? This is about everyone who's underestimated you. Russell sipped his bourbon. They thought I was weak because I chose to be invisible. They're about to learn how costly that assumption was. Across town, in a hotel suite she could barely afford, Adrian paced while her attorney delivered the bad news. The prenup is ironclad, Mrs. Merrick. Your husband's legal team has provided evidence of your infidelity, including hotel receipts, photographs, and recorded conversations. Given these circumstances, you're only entitled to your personal assets. That's impossible, Adrian hissed. Russell has billions. I've been his wife for 15 years. I'm entitled to half. Not according to the agreement you signed. The terms were explicit about infidelity. He tricked me. He pretended to be a nobody for our entire marriage. The attorney sighed. Deception about wealth isn't grounds for invalidating a prenuptial agreement. His financial disclosures to you before marriage were technically accurate, just incomplete. After the attorney left, Adrian called Barry, who had checked into a different hotel under an assumed name. We need to talk, she said, her voice tight with controlled fury. Not over the phone, Barry replied, paranoia evident in his tone. Russell has eyes and ears everywhere. Meet me at the pier in an hour. The rain had stopped, but the night air was cold as Adrian approached the deserted pier. Barry emerged from the shadows, his designer suit replaced by jeans and a parka, his handsome face haggard. How did we not know? Adrian demanded without preamble. How did you work with him for 10 years and never suspect? He played us masterfully, Barry admitted. Do you know what he told me when he fired me? That he chose me because I was convincing. A perfect mouthpiece who would never question where the ideas came from as long as I got the credit. We need to fight back, Adrian insisted. Together, we could expose him. Expose what? That he's actually brilliant instead of average? That he's secretly built a tech empire while letting someone else take credit? The media would love him for it. Barry laughed bitterly. Face it, Adrian. We're finished. I've lost my reputation, my career, everything. So that's it. You're just giving up. What choice do I have? Russell controls everything. My bank accounts are frozen pending a company audit. My reputation is destroyed. I can't even get my clothes from the penthouse because it turns out I never owned it. Adrian stared at him in growing horror. So your plan for us? There is no plan anymore, Barry said, not meeting her eyes. I'm leaving the country tomorrow. My cousin has a place in Costa Rica where I can lay low until this blows over. And what about me? What about the kids? Barry finally looked at her, his expression empty of the charm that had seduced her. That's not my problem anymore. As he walked away, Adrian realized that the first domino had fallen, and with it, the carefully constructed future she had sacrificed her marriage to pursue. Chapter 5. The Calculated Fall. 1 month after assuming control of Apex, Russell sat in a private meeting room at the Westlake Country Club. Across from him was Lawrence Ward, CEO of Helix Technologies, Apex's largest competitor and Barry's new employer. I appreciate you meeting with me, Lawrence said, his tone respectful but wary. Barry speaks highly of your organization. Does he? Russell replied mildly. Interesting, considering he's currently suing me for wrongful termination. Lawrence shifted uncomfortably. Business is business. Barry has valuable insights into Apex's operations. No doubt, Russell agreed. Though I wonder what insights he could possibly offer about programs and strategies he never actually created. He slid a folder across the table. Lawrence opened it, his expression changing as he reviewed the contents. These are the actual development timelines for Apex's core products, Russell explained. Note the timestamps and authorization codes. Every major innovation Barry claimed came directly from me. Lawrence closed the folder. Why show me this? Professional courtesy. Barry Donovan is a fraud who takes credit for other people's work. If you choose to continue employing him, you should know exactly what you're getting. And what do you get out of warning me? Russell smiled. The satisfaction of watching Barry fail on his own merits, without my work to prop him up. But there's something else you should know. He produced a second folder containing emails between Barry and several Helix board members, discussing proprietary Apex technologies. Corporate espionage is a serious matter, Russell observed. Barry's been sharing confidential information with your team for months. information he had no legal right to disclose. Lawrence paled. These appear to be communications with our board, not me. I'm aware. That's why I'm speaking with you directly instead of our legal team. You have 24 hours to terminate Barry and return all Apex-related materials before I file charges. As Lawrence left, ashen-faced, Felix joined Russell at the table. That was ruthless, Felix noted. Even for you. It's just beginning, Russell replied. Barry thought he could steal my company and my family. I'm going to make sure he never works in this industry again. Meanwhile, Adrienne faced her own reckoning. Her attempts to contest the prenup had failed, leaving her with mounting legal bills and dwindling resources. The hotel had become too expensive, forcing her to move into a modest apartment with Zachary and Penny, who were growing increasingly resentful of their reduced circumstances. Why can't we just go home, Mom? Penny asked as they ate takeout pizza in their sparsely furnished living room. Dad would let us come back. Your father is a manipulative liar, Adrienne snapped. He deceived all of us for years. About being rich? Zachary countered. That's not exactly a crime. Meanwhile, you were cheating on him with his fake boss. Adrienne's phone rang, an unknown number. She answered to find Teresa Malone on the line. Mrs. Merrick, I'm calling regarding your former position at Apex. We've reviewed your employment history and found some irregularities. Adrienne's stomach dropped. What irregularities? Several marketing campaigns you claimed credit for were actually developed by other team members. We have documentation showing you appropriated their work. Additionally, your hiring appears to have violated company nepotism policies, given your relationship with Mr. Donovan. That's absurd. I was qualified. Nevertheless, Teresa continued smoothly. The company has grounds to recover your salary and bonuses from the past 6 months. However, Mr. Merrick is prepared to waive these claims in exchange for your signature on the divorce agreement, as originally presented. After the call ended, Adrienne threw her phone against the wall, cracking the screen. What was that about? Zachary asked. Your father, Adrienne said bitterly. He's threatening to sue me for fraud if I don't accept his divorce terms. Can he do that? Apparently, your father can do whatever he wants. He owns everything and everyone. That night, as her children slept, Adrienne composed a desperate email to Russell, pleading for mercy and suggesting reconciliation. His response came within minutes. Adrienne, I have no interest in reconciliation. You made your choice. Now you're experiencing the consequences. Sign the papers, and you can keep what little you have left. Fight me, and I'll take even that. The children are welcome to return home anytime they wish, without you. As she read his words, Adrienne finally understood that the quiet, unassuming man she had dismissed for years had been a slumbering giant. And now that he was awake, his vengeance would be absolute. Chapter 6. The Turning Tide. 6 weeks after Barry's termination from Helix Technologies, Russell reviewed the latest intelligence from his private investigator, Damon Walsh. Donovan's desperate, Damon reported. No one in the industry will touch him. He's been blackballed from every major tech company in the country. What about abroad? Russell asked. He tried Singapore and London. No luck. Your evidence of his corporate espionage scared off potential employers. He's selling assets to cover legal fees. Russell nodded. And Adrienne? Still in the apartment with the kids. Her job interviews haven't panned out. Your name carries weight, and people are hesitant to cross you by hiring her. I haven't interfered with her employment prospects, Russell noted. You haven't had to. Your reputation does the work for you now. Russell considered this. The children. Zachary's failing classes. Penny's withdrawing socially. They're caught in the middle of a war they didn't sign up for. Russell was silent for a moment. Thank you, Damon. That will be all. After the investigator left, Russell stared out at the city skyline, weighing his next move. The buzzing of his phone interrupted his thoughts. A text from Zachary. Can we talk? Just you and me. Not about Mom. Russell replied with a time and place. The following afternoon, Russell found his son waiting at a quiet cafe, looking thinner and more subdued than he remembered. Thanks for coming, Zachary said as Russell sat down. Of course, Russell replied. How are you holding up? Zachary shrugged. Everything's different now. Mom's constantly stressed about money. Penny cries all the time. And I'm trying to figure out which parts of my life were real. I never lied to you about what matters, Russell said. I just didn't share everything. Why not? Didn't you trust us? It wasn't about trust. I wanted you to have a normal childhood, not one defined by wealth and privilege. Zachary studied his father with new eyes. Mom says you're destroying her out of revenge. Is that what you believe? I don't know what to believe anymore. But I know that Penny and I are collateral damage in whatever war you and Mom are fighting. Russell considered his son's words. You're right that you shouldn't suffer for your mother's choices. You and Penny are welcome to come home anytime. Without Mom, Zachary clarified. Without your mother, Russell confirmed. That's non-negotiable. Zachary was quiet for a moment. She's still our mom. Whatever she did to you. This isn't just about what she did to me, Russell interrupted. It's about character. Your mother conspired with Barry to take everything from me, including you and your sister. They were willing to destroy my life for their own gain. Those aren't the actions of someone who deserves loyalty. So we have to choose, Zachary said bitterly. Life is full of choices, Zach. This is just the first difficult one you've had to make. As Zachary left, Russell received another call, this time from Barry. Merrick, Russell answered coldly. We need to talk, Barry said, his voice ragged. Face to face. We have nothing to discuss. I'm facing criminal charges for corporate espionage. My reputation is destroyed. Isn't that enough for you? Not even close, Russell replied. You tried to steal my company, seduce my wife, and turn my children against me. There is no enough for what you attempted. I'll go public, Barry threatened desperately. Tell everyone how you manipulated me, used me as a puppet. Go ahead. The world loves a good story about a hidden genius. They'll see you as the fraud you always were. After hanging up, Russell called Felix. It's time for phase 2. Leak the emails between Barry and the hedge fund managers. The following morning, financial news channels exploded with revelations that Barry had been secretly communicating with hedge fund managers about shorting Apex stock while he was still CEO. A clear case of securities fraud that sparked an immediate SEC investigation. By evening, Barry had been arrested at his cousin's beach house in Florida, where he'd fled after his assets were frozen. The footage of him being led away in handcuffs played on every news channel. Adrian watched the coverage in horror, realizing that Russell's vengeance was methodical and absolute. When her phone rang with Russell's number, she answered immediately. Are you calling to gloat? She asked. No, Russell replied calmly. I'm calling about the children. Zachary reached out to me. There's suffering in the middle of this situation. So now you care? After systematically destroying everything. I've always cared about them. That's why I'm offering a final arrangement. Sign the divorce papers as presented, and I'll provide you with a modest monthly stipend, enough to live comfortably but not extravagantly. In exchange, the children can split their time between us until they're 18. Adrian laughed bitterly. So you'll buy access to my children? I'm offering you financial stability and the chance to maintain a relationship with Zachary and Penny. It's more than you deserve, but they shouldn't have to choose between their parents. After a long silence, Adrian asked, why now? Why offer this after everything? Because unlike you and Barry, I don't use children as pawns, Russell answered. You have 24 hours to decide. After that, the offer expires permanently. As he ended the call, Russell knew the tide had turned decisively in his favor. Now it was simply a matter of how complete his victory would be. Chapter 7. The Brutal Truth. The woodland estate outside the city had once belonged to Russell's grandfather, the only inheritance he'd ever accepted. With its private lake and 10 acres of mature forest, it offered both seclusion and solace. Russell had spent the past month renovating the century-old mansion, creating a home that reflected his true self rather than the facade he'd maintained for years. On the stone terrace overlooking the lake, Russell reviewed the final divorce settlement. Adrian had ultimately accepted his terms, recognizing that fighting would only lead to further devastation. The children now spent weekdays with Russell and weekends with their mother, an arrangement that was proving more difficult than any of them had anticipated. Felix joined him on the terrace, handing him a glass of scotch. The latest reports from Damon, he said, placing a folder on the table. Barry's legal troubles are mounting. 3 separate federal investigations, plus civil suits from Helix and his former hedge fund connections. And Adrian? Complying with the agreement so far. She's found work at a small marketing firm, ironically, one that doesn't have any connection to you. Russell nodded, gazing out at the lake. The children, adapting slowly. Zachary's grades are improving. Penny's still struggling. The sound of tires on the gravel driveway announced their arrival home from school. Russell had hired a driver to transport them between houses, eliminating the need for direct contact with Adrian. Zachary entered first, dropping his backpack and heading straight for the kitchen without acknowledging his father. Penny followed, her expression guarded. "How was school?" Russell asked. Penny shrugged. "Fine. Any homework?" "Nothing I can't handle," she replied, following her brother. Felix raised an eyebrow. "Still the cold shoulder?" "They're angry," Russell said. "They have a right to be." Their entire world collapsed. "Because of Adrian and Barry," Felix pointed out. "The catalyst doesn't matter to them. They just know things were one way, and now they're another." Russell sipped his scotch. "They need time." Later that evening, as Russell worked in his study, Penny appeared in the doorway. "Can I ask you something?" she said, her voice small. Russell set aside his laptop. "Of course. Did you ever love Mom? Or was that fake too?" The question cut deeper than Russell expected. "I loved her very much," he answered honestly. "For most of our marriage." "Then why all the secrets? Why pretend to be someone you're not?" Russell considered his response carefully. "I learned early in life that people treat you differently when they know you have money and power. I wanted relationships based on something genuine." "But you lied to us," Penny said, her voice breaking. "We're your family." "I never lied about loving you," Russell replied. "Everything I built with you and Zachary in mind." "Then why are you punishing Mom so much? Why can't you just let it go?" Russell's expression hardened slightly. "Your mother and Barry planned to take everything from me, including you and your brother. They weren't just having an affair, Penny. They were conspiring to destroy my life." "But you're destroying hers now," Penny countered. "How does that make you any better?" The question hung in the air between them, painful in its simplicity. "The difference," Russell finally said, "is that I never betrayed her. I never plotted against her. I never used the people she loved as weapons. But you're using money and power as weapons now." "I'm protecting what's mine," Russell stated firmly. "There's a difference between justice and revenge, Penny. Your mother chose her path. Now she's living with the consequences." Penny studied her father with eyes that suddenly seemed older than her 15 years. "I'm not sure I know who you are anymore." "I'm exactly who I've always been," Russell answered. "You're just seeing all of me for the first time." As Penny left, Russell considered her words. His children saw his actions as vengeful, not just. But they didn't understand the depth of the betrayal, how completely Adrian and Barry had planned to dismantle his life. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message contained only an address and a time, followed by, "If you want the full truth about Adrian and Barry, be there. Come alone." Russell forwarded the message to Damon and Felix. Whatever trap this might be, he wouldn't walk into it unprepared. The address led to a small cafe in a part of the city Russell rarely visited. As he entered, he spotted Olivia, Barry's former assistant, sitting alone in a corner booth. "Thank you for coming," she said as he sat down across from her. "I wasn't sure you would." "What truth could you possibly offer that I don't already know?" Russell asked. Olivia placed a small flash drive on the table. "Before everything fell apart, Barry asked me to compile information on you. Anything that could be used as leverage. I found something I don't think you know about." Russell eyed the drive warily. "What is it?" "Emails between Adrian and Barry going back 3 years, not 8 months. They've been plotting against you much longer than you realize." Russell's expression remained neutral, but his mind raced. "Why give me this now?" "Because they used me too," Olivia said bitterly. "Barry promised me a future, promotion, security, all lies. When everything collapsed, he cut me loose without a reference. I've been unemployed for months because of my association with him. And you want what in return? A job. Justice," Olivia replied simply. "What they tried to do to you, they've done to others. I'm not the only one Barry used and discarded." Russell took the drive. "I'll review this. If it's valuable, you'll hear from me." That night, in his private study, Russell examined the contents of the drive. What he found left him cold with fury. The conspiracy between Adrian and Barry hadn't begun with a chance meeting or sudden attraction. It had been calculated from the start. Barry had targeted Adrian specifically because she was Russell's wife, believing she might have information about the mysterious directives he received. Even more disturbing were Adrian's emails suggesting that if Russell couldn't be manipulated or controlled, perhaps an accident could be arranged. Barry had demurred, preferring less permanent solutions. But the fact that Adrian had even suggested it revealed a darkness Russell hadn't suspected. The final revelation was perhaps the most painful. Both Zachary and Penny had known about the affair for over a year. They hadn't been innocent bystanders, but willing participants in the deception, keeping their mother's secret while accepting Barry's gifts and attention. As dawn broke, Russell made a decision. The time for measured responses was over. Now, everyone would face the brutal truth of their choices. Chapter 8. The Final Checkmate. The Apex Innovations Charity Gala had been a highlight of the corporate social calendar for years. Under Barry's leadership, it had been an exercise in ostentation, more about showcasing his supposed generosity than actually supporting causes. Under Russell's direction, it had been transformed into something more substantive, with every dollar tracked and allocated to maximum effect. Russell surveyed the grand ballroom from a private balcony. Below, the city's elite mingled in formal attire, sipping champagne and making donations that would be announced with strategic fanfare. Teresa approached, elegant in a midnight blue gown. "Everything is in place," she confirmed quietly. "The presentation is ready whenever you are." Russell nodded. "And our special guests?" "Arriving shortly." Adrian confirmed this morning. Barry was more reluctant, but the promise of potential leniency was persuasive. "And the children?" "Already here, with their mother. They don't suspect anything." Russell straightened his tie. "Then it's time." As he descended to the main floor, conversations hushed briefly before resuming with increased animation. In the 3 months since assuming public control of Apex, Russell had become an object of fascination in business circles, the brilliant shadow architect who had orchestrated a decade of innovation while remaining invisible. He approached the small group where Adrian stood with Zachary and Penny. She wore a designer dress that must have consumed a significant portion of her monthly stipend, still trying to maintain appearances. "Russell," she greeted him coolly. "Adrian," he replied with equal reserve. "Children, I'm glad you could attend." Zachary nodded stiffly. Penny managed a small smile. "We should find our seats," Russell continued. "The presentation will begin shortly." As they moved toward the front of the ballroom, Russell spotted Barry entering with his attorney, looking diminished in a suit that no longer fit his frame perfectly. The months of legal battles and public humiliation had taken their toll. Once everyone was seated, Russell took the stage. The room quieted instantly. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he began. "The Apex Foundation's work has always been about creating positive change in our community. Tonight, however, I want to address something more personal." A murmur rippled through the audience. "Many of you have heard the stories about my unusual path to this podium, how I built Apex from the shadows while allowing others to take credit. What you haven't heard is why." Russell pressed a small remote, and the screens around the ballroom displayed a photograph of a young man, a younger version of himself. 20 years ago, I created my first company, a small startup with revolutionary encryption technology. I trusted my partners implicitly. That trust was repaid with betrayal. They stripped me of my creation, my patents, and nearly destroyed my reputation. The screens changed to show legal documents and news headlines from that period. I learned a painful lesson about human nature. When I founded Apex, I created a structure that would protect my work regardless of who might try to claim it. For 10 years, that structure served its purpose. Russell's gaze found Barry in the crowd. Unfortunately, history has a way of repeating itself. Once again, someone I trusted attempted to take what wasn't theirs. The screens now displayed emails between Barry and Adrian, carefully edited to remove the most damning content while still making their conspiracy clear. "What began as an affair evolved into something more calculated," Russell continued. "A systematic attempt to appropriate not just my company, but my entire life." Gasps and whispers filled the room as more emails appeared. Adrienne's face had gone deathly pale. Beside her, Zachary and Penny stared at the screens in horror. "I could have handled this privately," Russell acknowledged. "But private actions rarely prevent future transgressions. So tonight, I'm announcing the creation of a new foundation, one dedicated to investigating and exposing corporate espionage and fraud." He gestured toward a group of serious-looking individuals at a side table. "These federal agents and prosecutors have already begun their work with information I've provided. Their first cases involve individuals in this very room." Barry stood abruptly, his attorney clutching his arm in restraint. Adrian remained frozen in her seat, her eyes fixed on Russell with a mixture of hatred and fear. To my children, Russell continued, his voice softening slightly, I want to apologize. You've been caught in a war you didn't create, but were enlisted in nonetheless. Tonight, you'll learn truths that will be painful. For that, I'm sorry. He pressed the remote again, and new emails appeared, ones showing Zachary and Penny's knowledge of the affair, including messages where they discussed keeping it secret from their father. The final lesson I've learned is that loyalty can't be bought, inherited, or assumed. It must be earned and tested. Tonight marks the end of this chapter for all of us. What comes next is entirely up to you. As Russell left the stage, the ballroom erupted in chaos. Federal agents moved toward Barry, new warrants in hand. Adrian sat motionless, publicly exposed and humiliated. Zachary and Penny stared at their father as he approached their table. Was this necessary? Adrian hissed. In front of everyone? You chose the battlefield, Russell replied calmly. I simply ensured the fighting would be fair. He turned to his children. You knew about your mother and Barry for over a year. You helped them deceive me. Now you have a choice to make, the same one I offered months ago, but with full knowledge of what everyone has done. What choice? Penny asked, her voice barely audible. Come home with me tonight, cut ties with your mother and Barry, and we start fresh. Or stay with Adrian and accept that my door closes permanently. No more stipend, no more support, no more chances. That's monstrous, Adrian gasped. They're your children. Children who lied to my face for a year, Russell countered. Who knew what you were planning and said nothing. Actions have consequences, Adrian. It's time they learned that lesson. As Russell walked away, Felix joined him near the exit. Was all that necessary? The kids. They need to understand what loyalty means, Russell said firmly. They betrayed me too, Felix. Knowingly. They're old enough to face the consequences of that choice. And if they choose Adrian? Russell's expression hardened. Then they're no longer my concern. As he left the ballroom, Russell felt no satisfaction, only the cold certainty that justice, his version of it, had finally been served. Chapter 9. The Merciless Victory. 1 year to the day after the confrontation in his dining room, Russell stood at the window of his office atop the Apex Tower, watching the city lights emerge as dusk settled. The company had flourished under his direct leadership, its stock price tripling as his vision was implemented without Barry's diluting influence. The intercom buzzed. Mr. Merrick, your 6 o'clock is here. Send him in, Russell replied. The door opened to admit Maxwell Caldwell, CEO of Vortex Systems, one of the companies that had blackballed Barry after his fall from grace. Russell, Maxwell greeted him with the easy familiarity of new allies. Congratulations on the European expansion. Masterfully executed. Thank you, Russell replied, gesturing toward the sitting area. Drink. Scotch, if you have it. As Russell poured, Maxwell settled into a leather chair. I assume you've heard the news about Donovan? That his plea deal fell through? Yes. 10 to 15 years, Maxwell mused. A spectacular fall. He made his choices, Russell said simply, handing Maxwell his drink. And Adrian? Any word? Living in Phoenix now, I believe. Working at a small marketing firm. The monthly stipend ended when the divorce was finalized 6 months ago. Maxwell studied Russell carefully. And you're satisfied with how everything turned out? Russell's smile didn't reach his eyes. Justice was served. That's all that matters. And your children? The question hung in the air for a moment. Zachary chose to stay with his mother. He's attending community college in Arizona. Penny decided to come home. She's finishing high school here and has early acceptance to Stanford. Must have been a difficult choice for them. The only choice that mattered, Russell replied. Loyalty isn't complicated, Maxwell. Either it exists or it doesn't. After Maxwell left, Russell remained at the window, remembering the night of the gala. Penny had come home with him, silent and tearful. It had taken months to rebuild any semblance of trust between them, but gradually they had forged a new relationship, one based on honesty rather than appearances. Zachary had chosen differently. His final words to Russell, "You're no better than they are," had sealed a door that would never reopen. Felix entered without knocking, as was his privilege as Russell's oldest friend and now chief strategy officer at Apex. Lawrence Ward called, he reported. Felix is struggling without Barry's stolen innovations. He's open to acquisition talks. Schedule a meeting for next week, Russell decided. I want to review their patents first. Felix nodded, then hesitated. There's something else. Adrienne's mother passed away last night. The funeral is Wednesday in Phoenix. Russell was silent for a moment. He had always liked his mother-in-law, who had been kind to him even when Adrienne began to show contempt. Send flowers, he said finally. From Penny and me. Not going to attend? That part of my life is over. Felix studied his friend. You've won, Russell. Completely and utterly. Barry's in prison. Adrienne's starting from scratch at 43. You've even got Penny back. Isn't it time to let go of some of this intensity? Russell turned from the window, his expression resolute. This was never about winning, Felix. It was about justice. They conspired to destroy everything I built, to take my children, to erase me. I merely ensured they experienced the consequences of their actions. And Zachary, will you ever try to reconcile? He made his choice, Russell said firmly, just as Penny made hers. I respect his decision, even if I don't agree with it. Later that evening, as Russell arrived home, he found Penny waiting in the living room. Did you hear about Grandma Cooper? She asked. Yes, I've sent flowers. If you want to attend the funeral, I'll arrange transportation. Penny nodded. I'd like to go, and I'd like to see Zach while I'm there. Of course. He asks about you sometimes, Penny said carefully. I think he regrets his choice. Russell's expression remained neutral. His regret doesn't change the facts. He chose your mother, knowing what she did. He was 17, Dad. Confused and hurt. We both were. Age doesn't excuse betrayal, Penny. Actions have consequences. Zachary understood the terms. Penny was quiet for a moment. Is that what justice means to you? Never forgiving anyone who makes a mistake. What your mother and Barry did wasn't a mistake. It was a calculated betrayal. What you and Zachary did, lying to me for a year, that wasn't a mistake either. It was a choice. A choice we're still paying for, Penny said sadly. Russell softened slightly. You chose differently than your brother. You chose loyalty. I chose you because I was afraid of losing everything, Penny admitted. Not because I thought you were right. The honesty surprised Russell. And now, a year later? Penny considered the question. Now I understand why you did what you did. But I still think there should be room for forgiveness. For Zach, at least. Russell was silent for a long moment. I'll consider it, he finally said, though his tone suggested otherwise. That night, Russell reviewed the file Damon had provided on Zachary's life in Arizona. Despite his initial bravado, he was struggling, working part-time at a restaurant while attending classes, living in a small apartment with Adrienne, who was barely making ends meet herself. On his desk sat a small wooden box containing the watch his own father had given him when he turned 18, a tradition he had planned to continue with Zachary. The watch remained in its case, a symbol of an inheritance that would never be claimed. Russell closed the file and the box. In the war for justice, there were always casualties. Zachary had chosen his side and would live with that choice, just as Russell lived with his own. The ruthlessness that had built an empire and then protected it from those who would steal it wasn't something Russell could, or would, set aside. It was the core of who he was, revealed fully only when circumstances demanded it. As he turned out the light in his study, Russell reflected on the past year. He had lost his wife, one of his children, and the anonymity he had valued for so long. But he had preserved what mattered most, his legacy, his company, and his self-respect. In the realm of justice as Russell Merrick defined it, that was victory enough.